Hello, I am Jacob of Sizer, the Cornell Institute for Social and Economic Research. And today I'm going to do a brief overview, introduction of sorts, for using the Atlas.ti qualitative programming language. And for this introduction, I assume that you have access to Atlas.ti. And if you do not, and you are a Cornell member, then you can follow the steps I'm about to show on my screen in how you can go about getting an account through Sizer and gaining access to Atlas.ti for free. Other watchers of this video may skip about 10 minutes or less, 5 or 10 minutes, until I accomplish that demonstration. So here we go. Share my screen. And I'm actually connected to, right now, the screen that you share, that you see, sorry. I'm connected to, hold on one moment. I'm connected to one of the Sizer servers that allows me to use Atlas.ti already. So, and this part, doesn't have to be done on the Sizer servers, but you'd open a web browser and you'd go to the web page of Sizer.cornell.edu. That's CISER period Cornell.edu. And to request an account to gain access to Atlas.ti, I would scroll down just a bit, go to the computing spot of our web page, and right here on the side is request an account. Request account on the side. And then I'd click the button for apply for a research account or a secure data services account if I'm working with identifiable information. And then for Cornell users, you would sign in to this link and complete a request to gain access to this service. And users don't by default have access to Atlas.ti. They have to request it to be able to use it. And so the next iteration of the process of using Atlas.ti for free at Cornell is you request this kind of account through here, and then you send an email to, that would just be sizer@cornell.edu, basic email saying, hey, I'd like to use Atlas.ti. Could I have an account? Could you give me access? And I'll say, sure, and I'll give you access. But that is the process of gaining Atlas.ti for free through Cornell. And I also sent you some files in the form of a zip file that contains sample documents for Atlas.ti and for this workshop, as it's always better when working in Atlas.ti to practice how you're going to analyze your actual work with sample files, so you're familiar with the concept and you don't make any mistakes working with your real actual data. The last thing we want is to make errors with our relevant data. We can make mistakes and learn with sample data all we want. But I open Atlas.ti, I had just gone to the menu, and Atlas.ti was one of my default options, but if it's not there, then underneath S for scientific software folder will give me the Atlas.ti quick tour, which is a great PDF for learning the program Atlas.ti. As well, Atlas.ti, actually, it was underneath the A's. So it used to be underneath scientific software, no longer. But I already have the application open, and I'm going to get the files that are required for this intro. Now, officially starting working with Atlas.ti. And I'm going to create a new project from scratch. If I needed to import a project, I could do that too. One that I received from a coworker or a fellow researcher. But for the demonstration, new project from scratch. And I'll call it training. Really doesn't matter what the name is. And Atlas.ti, the qualitative software language, is very based off of the mouse, lots of pointing, lots of clicking, the ability to transform your interface in any way that you'd want by resizing windows or even removing windows and placing them in any kind of location that I would want to. So I can move these parts around. I notice up here at the ribbon and at the buttons up top, using the mouse and selecting those items is where I will accomplish all of my tasks. Not so much typing unless I'm creating categories or I'm putting in comments or typing a memo, but lots of using the mouse, and right-clicking is a very helpful and functional feature. And right now I'm just working with an empty project, really, as I need to get the files that are associated with this demonstration, either from the link below in the descriptions tab, or I had sent this to you, the files that is. And so I have them downloaded already, so I'll just copy them from my download section, and I want to put them, in its own specific folder, really. So I've pasted my Atlas.ti training zip file, and I right-click on it to extract its contents. I don't want to create a whole nother folder here. Just keep it in this folder. And there we go. For this demonstration, I included some Word files. I included a survey, as you can import survey data into Atlas.ti too. And some media files. I'm thinking maybe I should have gotten an image, or maybe a PDF file would have been a good idea as well. So I'll consider maybe adding those in at the end, just because I think that's important. But there are my files. And within Atlas.ti, I can add individual documents or multiple files at the same time. And such, I'll do that with all of the files that I just extracted from that zip folder. I do add documents in the top left button, and I'll add files will be the standard option. I find the location of where I just extracted those contents. And I'm just going to highlight everything, put it in. And before you place items into Atlas.ti, you must recognize that once they're in Atlas.ti, you want to be working with a perfected form of your document. There is no editing of files once they're inside Atlas.ti. So you want your documents or PDFs or audio recordings or pictures to be perfect once you bring them into the software. And if at any point you have to make an edit to one of these files, then you'd have to make the edit in the program itself, like open Microsoft Word of the original file, make the change, and then re-import it back into Atlas.ti. So you want a perfected form. And now I build off of what I said earlier with the mouse, with the pointing and the clicking. The only thing I've done is add some files or documents, as I will refer to them. But I see in this Explore tab, I can look at all my documents. I actually don't really like to use this Explore window very much, me personally, but there's always more than one way, typically, to accomplish the same task. I prefer to use these bigger, larger buttons at the top. So I can click on the Documents button and see all of the files that I had added. A video file, cool. An audio file, and some Word files. And I've done nothing to them yet. They're just into Atlas.ti. And so I guess this could be a good moment to file and, file and save my work. Of course, saving your work in Atlas.ti, in this case, really only creates the memory of the project. I can't go back to my folder here and say, well, where's the actual file, like hard copy file, Atlas.ti project file that I can send to other people and that they can import into their personalized Atlas.ti. And that would be file and export. So earlier I did file save, now file export, and project bundle if I want to get an actual copy of this. And what's cool about this exporting option is it gives me a date stamp. I like that to know. I think it's a safe idea to export your projects often so that you don't take any chance with saving of Atlas.ti. You actually have a hard copy file of your project and your work. And the date stamp helps with letting you know which version of the exported file is the most recent. But I've talked about the details for a lot. Now I'd like to actually just start opening some documents and working with that. Notice though that when I clicked the Documents button before, that it brought up these other windows up here at the top of my ribbon. There's new windows that are activated, and to get back to my original screen, I'd have to mouse over and go to the home button so that I can select documents or codes or memos. And I realized that, well, the document manager, it's open here in its own little tab. I could, float this around just like I'm doing with the Explore tab and have documents open all at the same time and open other stuff too. I don't really like that. So I can click this and go, not that, this button, to dock it back. I like them as the tabs like here, like a web browser. And quickly on the documents here, I can open the group manager, which means if I ever, in this case, wanted to categorize some of my files into larger bins, then I could do that here, which simplifies my analyses later on, or at least increases the sample size for my groups. So I'll create a group and I'll call it, text interviews. And I see that I'll honestly just grab all of the files here. For Windows computer, holding the Control key to select multiple items, that's allowed. And I'll grab all of the text interviews and leave out these two other kind of interviews that look like they are video and audio. So they will not be in my group. Okay. And just like I had what happened with the documents, I open a documents manager to create groups, and that again also creates its own tab and its own options in the menu. So I'll close out of that. And I'll get right into one of these interviews. I'll do one or two of them. I'm not going to do a bunch. This thing's starting to get in my way now. So this is an interview with Barbara. And what I'm going to do next is a huge, huge piece of Atlas, the coding. And so that would be, at least what I encounter, most often researchers are doing. And that would be checking out the text, like text analysis, and grouping the text into different categories. And for this, workshop demonstration, maybe it's not as reliable since I'm just showing the features of Atlas.ti. It's not necessarily going to provide me real or relevant results, but I'm sure there are a lot more applicable cases that can be done as examples. Okay, so here we go. My husband and I bought this little cottage in '96. I'll take that sentence and I'll highlight it just like I'm working inside of Word. And I can edit my sections of the highlight with these orange sections. But my husband and I bought a cottage in '96. I want to categorize this little snippet of text. Again, there's multiple ways to accomplish the same task. I can right-click on this selection and see essentially all the same items I see up here in the menu. So I right-click, and in this case, I'll use the option Open Coding. And there's described in this document 3 methods of coding. There's, well, I guess 4. There's open coding, in which I see this passage, I want to categorize it as some kind of label or some kind of group, and it's not created yet. The group is not created yet. The label has not been established. So open coding is for creating these labels. I'll call this a purchase because they bought a house. And I'll say it is happiness because they bought a little cottage and that just seems really nice to me. So I'm going to say that makes me feel happy. And I can code, as you see, I can code more than one category to the same snippet of text. And now I'm just gonna scroll down some more and pick some random text, honestly. And it says, yeah, and I'm going to skip here. I'm definitely not considered a local, even though I kind of feel like a local. And so that to me, interesting coding, but that to me would be, interesting. I think that's interesting. So I'll open coding and I'll type interesting. Great code groups being created here. Interesting. But I want to touch more on the other coding options that I have. And so I'll scroll down some more. She got a degree in geology. And so I'm going to highlight that section. Woo, cool. And from the menu, this time I'll use list coding. I'll also say that that fits into my category of interesting. So I'll select interesting. List coding is the option I use when you want to put a snippet of text in a group or labeled category that you've already created. So you just want to reference that already created label and apply it to this little snippet. So open coding is for creating new codes, and list coding is for referencing the codes that you've already created. This next coding method, I haven't really found a purpose for it yet, but I'll explain it anyways, where the coding and Vivo will create a new code, and that new code will have the name of the paragraph or text that you highlighted. So this I could see maybe only relevant if you're searching for a specific word or two specific words in a row and you want to label that as those two words. So you could see the occurrence of two words in a row being mentioned over and over again. Of course, with creating these codes, I've only been doing one sentence, but you can create them to be, entire paragraphs if I want them to be. I can create these bins or categories as small or as large as I want. Although, heed some warnings that ideally you'd rather have less frequency of codes created with a lot of occurrences, a lot of observations for those few codes. So it's kind of like high sets, low reps. Yeah, that's what I meant. And that would mean few categories, lots of stuff in those few categories. As the least thing you want to do is Atlas.ti is here to really just facilitate your work in the software. You are still doing all of the work. It is just helping you organize this information. So the least thing you want to do is start working within Atlas.ti and get everything set up and then create a bunch of codes like 50 or 60, each with 2 or 3 frequencies per code, and then realize, oh, dang, at the end, well, I can't really do much analysis with this. So I'll highlight this whole paragraph and I'll say list coding. I'll put this one as happiness and purchase. I didn't even really read it, but I'll just put it in that whole category to show that you can use a whole paragraph as a code. And I see on my Explore window, just counting, I have 4 codes that's been created. I have my document group and 9 documents. So that could be helpful with knowing that when I open this document, there's new windows that appear and whatnot. But I'd say, you know, I am actually done with Actually, before I'll look at this, because I just happened to glance at the bottom paragraph, obstacles that get in the way. And I'll highlight something zoned or unzoned. And I'll open coding because I'm creating a new code. And I'll say obstacles. Or maybe, yeah, obstacles. 5 codes, and that's what I'll stick with. And I'll go through not all of these interviews that I have, but I'll go through a few of them. Where, ooh, let's check out this video that's going on. I actually just want to open it up. So here's a video. I actually have no idea what it is, but I can play it if I want to notice on visual cues about the people. And, you know, I can capture video frame, which is essentially like the equivalent of creating codes for videos. I do this mark position, and then I can play. And now I have the option of right here to create a quotation. If I want to get the snippet of text that I just got from when I marked the position to when I paused it, or whenever I decide that I want to create the quotation. And so that is the equivalent of, oh, here we go. And I can right click on that section, open coding, I shouldn't have done open coding. Should have done list coding. And I'll select, geez, I don't even know. I'll pick obstacles. So that is how I would accomplish coding in a video. So I'll close out of that video quickly. The same goes for audio files as well. And while I'm on it, every single element, every code, every document, everything can be assigned a comment. So for this nice little video of this couple, I'll say nice video of couple as my comment. I can click on this button here, and this little tiny yellow signature in the bottom right of the logo for the file type gets a yellow squiggly, meaning that there's a comment applied to this item. And, you know, I think I'll open one more interview for Charles, and I'll do some quick coding through this so that I can move on with talking about the next features of Atlas.ti. I don't want to spend the whole time coding. I just wanted to touch on it. This time I'll use the option of auto coding. This is cool. So this is if I wanted to look for specific words inside of my document. So like I said, with the coding in vivo, if whenever I encounter two words, one after the other, then I want to code that as this category. And to quickly go through that entire process, then I could, I'll say problem will be, a text kind of thing that I'll look for. And I'll ignore the case too. And if that is displayed in the document, then I want to put that into the obstacles code. Like I see the word problem and I think, well, that's an issue, that's an obstacle. I'll put it in that. Let's see. Was there any occurrence? Oh yeah, here we go. So problems. Hey, all right. I'm glad. I was afraid that I would scroll through this whole page and realize that there was no occurrence of the word problem. But whoo, that's nice. So that's auto-coding. And I can also change different features of this to look for other things. So this one gets a word. I can take the whole paragraph or the entire sentence of when I see problem, then I'll recode this again and say, oh, grab the whole sentence where it says problem. And so that didn't work. But I guess the word, and I want the sentence. Or no, what I code here, this is what I want. I want the sentence to code. So now when I go down here, still no. It's getting me now. That's okay. That's okay. I'll try this one more time. I'll switch this to the text. And yeah, it says, this looks all correct. It might be because it's already coded. Maybe I'll try creating a new code. Say probs. Okay, so it did get the whole paragraph, or the whole sentence, that is, when I attempted that. So that was more proving the point. I actually want to maybe delete some of those, but maybe not. And I'll go through and I'll grab some snippets here. The second part of Charles's reference here. I've lived all over the country for years. Okay, so I'll take list coding and I'll say that seems like happiness to me. That seems interesting to me as well. And I'll press OK. And I'll go through and do the same for other stuff. The people make it special. And that is going to be another list coding of happiness. This time I just did one. And okay, I think I'm good with coding this document as well. Just coded some stuff. And now, I've dealt enough with the documents mostly. And I'm going to address looking at my codes now. So I'll exit out of this tab, or better, I can just go to the home button on the ribbon and select, well, I'll start with my quotations actually. As many times I breezed over the quotations because whenever you create a code, you also create a quotation. That is why you see these quotations are displayed and it's not empty. some details about this window is, I can sort the quotations by the code. So if I wanted to come in after I've completed all of my coding, I'd say, well, what did people say were obstacles in this project? And I could say, well, this video 7 seconds in, or 5 seconds in for 7 seconds, zoned or unzoned. This one just says problem. maybe not the best in that case. So actually it helps when I did that quick coding to snag the whole sentence from when I see the word problem. And so this actually is nice. And it's not necessarily all negative, but unfortunately, the model that we in North Carolina have chosen uses some outdated, old ways. So that gave me some good information right there. And the problems never go away. And so now I can be like, if I had more examples of this case, see, wow, this one's really interesting. You never have the money after the fact to deal with the problems. I'll say, what? I want more context on this. Where did somebody say this? When was it said? I can double click on that quotation and it will bring me right where in the document where I created that quotation or that code. So I can get more context. I could read the paragraph before or whatever. And it opens up a new tab for Charles as well. Again, graphical user interface with the mouse and the pointing and the clicking and lots of stuff. And a little bit more on the details when it shows density here, that really means frequency. So this part here that says, my husband and I bought this little cottage. It has a frequency of 2 because I remember coding that sentence as happiness, and purchase. So it has a density of 2. This one, the people make it special. I only coded as normal happiness so that gets 1 density. So those are quotations. They're cool. I'll stick with quotations just briefly. I'll say in this prob section, I actually feel like I didn't want to make it intentionally, and now I'm rolling with it a lot. I want to create what's called a word cloud, which will show me it'll show me at least the words that are most commonly used from these quotations. And so this actually gave me a word list. I thought I clicked word cloud. Oh boy, that's not what I wanted. That got a word cloud of the entire thing there. Aha, so word cloud. Of course, problems is going to be the #1 word, but this shows me a nice visual demonstration of the quotations that I said were created by the word problems and what other words seem to associate with those groups that I created. Never, deal. The larger words have the higher frequency. And so I'll close out of that. And I'll close out of quotations too, because when I click on the codes manager, I will essentially be doing the same thing. So very, very similar to the quotations. The codes show me the grounded is the frequency. I use the happiness code 4 times. The obstacles code is my largest code frequency with 5. And I'll do some quick things in this code manager because I think it's pretty fun and they're very interesting. What I'll do first is I'll say obstacles and problems. Those are two very, very similar codes. And what I'll do is I'll say, let's create a link to them, like a relationship. So I have obstacles highlighted and I click and hold and drag around over to my problems code and it says link to that. And I release my mouse to say, well, obstacles, it is a property of problems, I'd say. So I'll put that in as one of my links. And you see, when that was done, the density went up to 1, meaning that counts the number of links that you have. And since I'm on this links creation, I'll say problems and happiness seem to be opposites to me. So I'll take problems and I'll drag it over to happiness. And I'll say is either contradicts. I can create my own group if I want to, but I'll say problems contradict happiness just because it's there. Problems reaches a density of 2. Happiness a density of 1. Hey! And now I want to, similar to my documents group, I want to create a code group. And so I mouse up here, open group manager. And I can, just like I did with the documents group, except this time I think I'll create a little bit more groups, something that might give me some analysis moving towards the end of this demonstration. But I'll take happiness, interesting, and that's it. And I'll put that in a new group called positive. So those are positive things. They get that. I'll open a new group and I'll call that negative. So I'll do a comparison of positive and negative. It's like a pros and cons comparison. Imagine using Atlas.ti for pros and cons. It's actually, that's funny. Might do that. A glorified pros and cons. And I'll put problems and obstacles and I'll put limiting factor maybe in that group. Okay, so now I have 2 code groups that can be compared. I like where this is headed. I'll close out of it and I can click on these code groups to see their counts. Very good. I click on this empty space to see all of the codes that I have. And let's say now I'll move on to the next facet of me looking into these codes. I did a word cloud in my quotations. Of course, similar to the quotations, I can open up, let's say interesting this time. I'll double click on interesting to say, well, what did people say? Or yeah, what did I find in these interviews that I found to be interesting? And it shows me the 3 quotations that I found interesting from the 2 text and 1 video interviews that I did. So I think the codes manager is pretty much eliminates the need for the quotations manager. I never go to quotations because they're already here within the codes. It just seems like an extra step for me. But again, who am I to sit here to tell you how you should program? You should do however you like to do it. But I can see, oh, I said this part that I thought was interesting. She's got a geology degree. And so I can double click on that quotation. And again, it will open up the interview for Barbara, where this was said by Barbara herself. But alas, I want to look at this positive section. So I'll take my positive code group and I will generate a report, since I didn't do that with quotations, even though it was an option. I click report and I can look at, oh, geez, I want the filtered items here. This gives me counts. If I want to do all items, that's all the codes that I've created. Filter items are just this positive group, although all items, that doesn't really add up, but because that's 5. Oh, I didn't put one in a group. So I'll put the dates and the users. Shows me the quotation, the content, the comments, if there are any. That'd be nice. I like that. Put some comments in there. Yeah. And that should be all. I'll just generate this report for some simplicity's sake. And what the report does is it breaks it up by code and then by quotation. So this would be something that if I were sending to my boss or my supervisor, well, this is what I would send. I would be like, this is what was said about happiness, or this is what I found to describe happiness in all of the interviews that I got. And this is what I found would be interesting. It shows the quotation in full. Right here, it kind of chops off, but then shows the full quotation underneath it. And so that's really cool. Like, I like that. That's awesome. I can save it if I want, and doing such would be as a Word document, as an actual document rather than an Atlas.ti saving the project, which just keeps it in the memory. So that's report. I can do Excel report as well, which is more or less the same thing. I'll do that for my negative groups. Let's say this time, I'll include a density and the grounded too. Why not? I'll create it. Looks like it's giving me some options. And after I deal with this code, I'll touch on a couple more things, like I'll create a network quickly for visualizing the links and relationships that I have. I see this exported report looks very similar to what I had in the codes manager itself. So I'm actually not crazy about that. I'll open it up to see if there were any options to actually show the text, which it didn't. It just showed the counts. So report itself is more actually looking at the qualitative aspect inside of the information, the text analysis, and how I categorize these bins and why I put them in there. With actual Excel report is more getting the frequency counts and preparing to import into a quantitative programming language, if that is what I wanted to do. Mixed methods. So I'll click on this empty space to get all of my codes again. And I said I was going to touch on a network. So I'll do a network. The network will show my, in this case, my codes and the relationships they have to each other. So I just click on all of them. Just click them all. And I say, open network. And it'll take some time to load, but it tells me here where I can see aha, I can move around the relationship, and I remember that happiness contradicts problems. Obstacles are a property of problems, and these other ones are just independent of each other. And there's a lot that you can do inside of this network. So you can create links if I want to. So this one, I can link to problems if I wanted to create that in here. I can create links. I can disassemble links. That's good. Let's see. I want to do this. I cut this link. Obstacles. Cut. It's removed. And then I can also link it there and say, I'll bring it back. The same thing. It's a property of. I can change, well, I guess not. I was going to say I could change the way that these arrows look, like their line property, but that is probably only available in the links group manager. I can change the layout, the way it's looked, so I can use, well, that one's pretty poor, but I can use one of these predefined layouts. Again, I just created a new project and I just created a few codes, so it doesn't really help me that much to show this network, but just going over the details. And I can create new codes from in here as well. So that's awesome. No, I don't want to save it. But that's another thing that I would send to my boss if I had one related to Atlas.ti, where I'd send them my report of the codes and I'd send them the relationship, how the codes react between each other. And I remember this limiting factor was a code I created using code and Vivo, and yeah, I don't really care for it, so I'll highlight it and I'll delete the code just to show that I can delete codes. And also, I can add colors to these to these codes. So I'll pick a nice dainty color for happiness of turquoise, and for problems, I'll pick a bad color like, well, not black. I'll pick red, more like red error color. And that's all. So I can color code my items here, and I'll quickly open another network to show that color coding it makes it look prettier. So I like that. No, I do not. Next, I've talked about importing your files and your documents. I've talked about creating groups for your documents, adding another layer of organization for the files that you import. I've mentioned creating quotes and quotations using the Atlas.ti managers to create reports and to analyze, personally, firsthand, the text or the video snippet or audio recording that relates to that specific code or quotation mark. I talked briefly about networks with a not so full example, and word clouds too. And so I can also, if I want, I can merge codes together. If I have the two, I can merge two codes together if I want to, and then I can split them apart as well, which seems like I'd have to go through and figure out which ones fit into the obstacles section, which I think I'll honestly just randomly pick some. Oh, I'm sorry. but I need to know how to split this code. And I'll say probs is the code that it has. Maybe is obstacles. Obstacles was the code. So this one will have probs, and I'll get rid of boop, 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 and put these back in obstacles. And I think, yeah, there we go. Whatever. But I split the code again. Hey, and they're both red. Okay. So I'd say I'm done with the code manager at this part. I'm done with the documents manager too. So next on the list would be the memos. I'm not gonna dive deep into this, but memos would be a great resource for using as a team environment. You can create memos, and maybe I'll put the date and leave it in there intended for other researchers to look at so they can get information. Let's say I created a happiness code and interesting problems too. Whatever, I mean, I'm not going to go much into that. I'll put a timestamp on it. Seems kind of cool. Where my first thought of using a memo would be if I had a team of Atlas.ti and a team of 2 members. One of the members worked in the morning and another member worked in the afternoon. And each time that they signed into Atlas to work on their project, they included a memo with the date and the timestamp of what they did. So the person in the afternoon could come in and say, this is what my fellow researcher did in the morning. And on the flip side, the person in the morning can come in and say, well, this is what my other researcher did last night. So memos, just a brief description. You create one and you type into it as if it's like a Word file. So not much to get into there. Networks, I'd already described networks, but this is where if I had saved my networks, this is where they would be. Or I can create my own network from scratch if I want to. Not going to do that because I'd already talked about networks briefly. And links as well. So this is where within my network, I remember contradicts showed a, let's see, it showed that it was 2 directional lines. Now I was pretty sure there's a way to change the line direction of these networks. So you see, when I highlight the 2 and I open the network, contradict shows lines that go back and forth. And I was pretty sure there's a way that can switch that, but it doesn't appear to be the case. So I can change the relationships if I want to. And there we have it. Also not going to get into links very much too, because I had done the links within the code manager. So the code manager gets it done. But I could export this as an Excel report if I wanted to. I'm closing in on the final parts of my demonstration here. I hadn't talked about this Analyze tab, so I want to talk about this briefly. Well, maybe a little bit more than briefly. So I'll click on this co-oc table, which again opens up its own little new tab, like when I click on anything. but the co-auc table and the co-auc explorer are the same, just different displays. I prefer to use the table, so that's why I made that decision. And what this analysis, so this is the tab that you'll go to once you're more or less complete with your coding and your organization of your project. You're ready to analyze. And so this co-auc will show me the interactions, the combinations when I see codes. So I'll put happiness on this side, and I'll put purchase and interesting there as well. And I'll put obstacles on this side and problems on this side. That tell me that, oh, of the codes that I coded as happiness, well, there are 4 of them. One of those was also coded as interesting, and 2 of them were also coded as purchase. And if I click on this cell, I can see which ones those are. I remember the first code I created, my husband and I bought a little cottage. That was a purchase. That was happiness. And then I did another one that's a full paragraph. Wow, just a show of coding a full paragraph. And I see that the problems and the obstacles, there are 3 codes that fit into the problems that are also obstacles. And so this one actually pretty cool, where I remember I did quick coding for both of these. One quick coding that looked specifically for that one word, and then another quick coding that got the previous, or the whole sentence that contained that word. So this shows kind of like a rectangle can be a square, but a square, or no, a rectangle is always a square, but a square is not always a rectangle. So in this case, like the obstacles fits into the probs code, but it doesn't go the other way around. So I see the combinations of frequencies of codes. And I can show, let's see, I can switch the rows and columns. I can export this as a Excel file if I wanted to do such. That seems like a pretty good idea, so I'll go forth with it. A couple more things to talk about with the info section, now analyze section while I'm here. So I'll do the code document table, which is the same as the table I just did, except this time looks at the number of codes that occur in each document. So I know that, well, I actually only did codes for the 2 text interviews and 1 video. And now rather than picking the individual codes this time, I'll take the code groups as well, the negatives and the positives. And this is pretty fun, where I see in Barbara's text interview, she said, I noted 4 things that were positive in her interview and 1 thing that was negative. In Betty and whatever the other person's name is, let's say, Betty and Paul, I didn't actually go through this whole video, but I coded the very beginning thing as something negative, I guess, even though they looked so sweet, and I should have did that positive. And lastly, well, maybe Charles is a Debbie Downer. Name is Charles, though. And so I guess from my codes, I decided 6 of his interview I decided were negative items touched on, and 2 of them were positive. I can, go further here. I always like to add frequency percentages. So I'll include some row and some column frequencies. Here's the column frequencies and the rows. So of all the negative things that I coded, well, Charles took up 75% of them. And that was also 75% of the coding that I did for him was negative. Nice. Whereas for Barbara, more positive interview, I guess, 80% of her codes were positive, which led to 2/3 of all of the codes for these 3 documents were from Barbara. And again, I can export this as an Excel report, but this would be like final touches once I'm done organizing all of my content. Then I'd address this analyze window. Okay, final touches here. I'll do file and I'll do save as I create a history within Atlas.ti. But again, I always think it's a good idea to do file, export, and project bundle so that I have an actual hard copy of this file. I'll call this ending. So I have a starting project bundle and I have a ending project bundle, where when I open up my folder, I see, oh, they're right here. So there they are. There are the files. I can send those to other people. And I'll touch on, because also working with survey data is very common in Atlas.ti. So that can be done as well with this import and export tab. So import and export, here are the types of surveys that I can import, or just basic survey in general, which looks for an Excel file. So I have this rental car satisfaction survey. I haven't even looked at it. I don't even know what it is, but I know that with every individual row of this Excel survey will take its own document file. So if there's 15 rows in the Excel file, there will be 15 more documents added, which would be a total of 24. Now this is actually kind of taking a while, so I'm going to close out of that. I'm thinking maybe it is because there are a lot of rows in this Excel file. So I'll open up the Excel spreadsheet and I'll probably delete some of the rows if there's a bunch of them. Yeah, I'll keep the first 5 rows and the rest of them I will just, dang it. The rest of the rows I will delete. Oh, what happened? Aha, I see. All right, let's try this again. Okay. All right, so now first 5 rows. Some might be a little bit quicker, probably will. But I'll go to my rental car survey and I'll open it up again to import the survey, just like I said. So now when I go to my documents section here, as I mentioned, each row will have its own thing here. Each row of the Excel file will be its own document file in Atlas.ti. It looks like Atlas.ti automatically coded some of this stuff. I don't really like that. It coded it by the question. I'd probably want to get rid of, all of these if possible. Maybe there's a way with the way I imported it into here. Maybe there were options. I don't think so. All I do know is there are features within this Excel file in Atlas.ti. Now, these are labeled case 1, case 2, and case 3. But that's not very organized. If I want to assign names to them, well, I guess I could rename the file inside of Atlas.ti. Or I could, I believe it's a column name with the heading as a exclamation point. And that would be how I would name the files as they come into Atlas.ti. There are more features about that too, with assigning a comment to it. Okay. And so I believe that pretty much sums up everything here. I touched on all of the buttons here at the main menu. I went through a nice little demonstration of creating some codes and in the end analyzing some of the information that I'd created. So Atlas.ti, a great qualitative programming languages, heavy focus on using the mouse and navigating the menus and the ribbons and the tabs and the various windows that can appear. Right clicking on items can always give you cool stuff. And thank you for listening. Jacob signing off.